Hi, everybody. In this lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about the learning contract and its importance to us here in the capstone. You may recall seeing this illustration in previous lectures. I just want to remind everyone that as part of ENVIR 490, the primary outcome of this course is to produce your research proposal and your learning contract based on the internship that you've secured and the specific topic that you're exploring. This learning contract is very important. It's going to guide the direction of your work as you transition into 491. It's also really important that you, your site supervisor, and faculty advisor are all on the same page about the direction of your work, the timing of meetings, the goals for your capstone in advance. Because at the end of this quarter, we'll be sharing the learning contract with your supervisor and faculty advisor, and they will need to sign off on that project. If there are delays in that process, it can actually have ripple effects as you progress into 491. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. This isn't something that you're going to have to come up with all at once. We're going to be doing this in iterative steps throughout the quarter. So how are we going to get there from here? We'll talk about the proposal in another video, but for the learning contract process, we're going to start by evaluating examples. Then once you are comfortable with the topic and comfortable with what's included, you will, for your own learning contract, engage with your site supervisor and faculty advisor to complete the learning contract document. And I will be there every step of the way to make sure that you get your questions answered. We'll have some aspect of peer review in class or outside of class. You'll revise that document before you have to turn in your final learning contract. I would encourage you to get your questions answered with your site supervisor and faculty advisor and with me well in advance of submitting your final learning contract. So let's just dive in and talk about what content is involved in the learning contract. There are multiple pages and there are fields on every page that you will need to complete. Let's start with the first page. The first page mostly sets out some of the specific features of your capstone. Obviously, details like your name, your student number, your email address are all important. And I want to make sure that it's very clear that when I say student email address, this is the email that you would like to use for all official capstone communication. Remember that, as we've discussed previously with professional email, this address is the one that you expect your site supervisor and faculty advisor to use, and the one you really should be sending your email from. The title of the capstone experience is an interesting one. This is a draft of the title as you think reflects your work in total, meaning more than just the title associated with the capstone catalog. This should include aspects of both your responsibilities to your host organization and your research. This is an example, I think, of a good title that encompasses those various aspects. Now, the capstone experience, the title of your capstone experience can change over time, and eventually the final title of your capstone experience will likely be the title of your synthesis paper that you complete in 492. And eventually we will read this title at the POE graduation ceremony. So it is an important aspect of the capstone, but you will have a chance to modify it throughout the experience. The next field is the contact phone number that you will use for urgent capstone business. I don't frequently need to contact students directly during their internships, but occasionally I do. And so I'd like to have a phone number where I can reach you. And ideally, you'll tell me what kind of phone number it is. If I'm going to be calling your parents' house, I want to know who I can expect is going to answer the phone. The next fields specify some details of not only your plan for your 491 experience, but what you plan to do beyond that. So will you pursue an honors capstone? Yes or no? Understanding that if you pursue an honors capstone, you will need to do a minimum of 8 credits of 491. If you're pursuing the typical capstone route, the minimum is 5 credits. The next field is the quarter and year that you will complete 492. Typically, students complete 490, 491, and 492 in consecutive quarters. And in this case, for this example, the student will be completing 492 in autumn of 2023. Note that an anticipated graduation is month and year. In this case, the student example is completing their capstone in autumn of 2023, but they're not graduating until the springtime of 2024, in this case, June of 2024. The last 2 fields specify not only the quarter in which 491 will occur, in this case, summer of 2023, but also the number of credits that will be completed within that quarter. In this case, 1 quarter of 491 during summer of 2023, in which 8 credits will be completed. Lower on the page, there's information about the capstone experience faculty advisor and the capstone experience site supervisor. Note that when you're completing information for your faculty advisor, you should include not only name, but also department and box number. I should point out that the box number for any particular faculty member is the box number for the entire department. So in this case, the College of the Environment's Dean Office has a box number. The box number is not specific to an individual faculty member, but to the department as a whole. And you can usually find this information on the department homepage under the Contact Us button. You should also include phone number and email address. Please verify that these are the correct phone number and emails, and double check to ensure that no errors are introduced. For the capstone experience site supervisor, we'd like to know that person's name, their title at their organization, the organization's name, the address of that organization, in this case, a street address, as well as their phone and email. Again, please ensure that no errors are introduced in this process, particularly in the email address, as this will be used in our communications with your site supervisor when we ask them to accept your learning contract and proposal. Errors can delay acceptance of these documents. So that's the first page. Moving over to the second page, in what we call section number 1, we have your learning goals and expectations for the capstone. This is an opportunity for you to articulate what you hope to get out of your capstone experience. There are 3 distinct sections to the learning goals and objectives. In the first paragraph, I want you to specify specific skills and knowledge areas that you are seeking to obtain or improve through the capstone. Really, what are you hoping to get immediately out of this effort? In the second paragraph, I'd like you to discuss previously acquired skills and knowledge that you will employ to complete your internship. What we are looking for in the second paragraph is evidence from courses that you've taken and specific course names and numbers that you have completed and the skills that you think you will be employing as part of your internship. In the last paragraph, the third paragraph, we want you to think about how the capstone might relate to your future career plans or academic objectives beyond your undergraduate degree. This is an opportunity for you to think about how this work can benefit you into your future. Again, there should be minimally 3 distinct sections that cover these topics. So minimally 3 paragraphs, if not more. I expect you to put in a significant amount of time on this effort and think critically about these various sections. Remember that your site supervisor and faculty advisor are going to read this material, and this is going to help them to better mentor you in your capstone. The next section, or section 2, lays out the when and where of your capstone project. Where will you be doing the work and when will you be doing that work? It's really important that we articulate this, in part because this will help you and your site supervisor get on the same page about your workload and the number of credits that you should register for. A really important metric for you to consider is that 1 academic credit equals around 30 hours of work. So for the standard 5 credit internship, you should anticipate 150 hours over the course of a quarter. In the case of a 10-week quarter, that will be about 15 hours a week. So you need to make that add up in your proposed schedule. If you're doing an honors capstone, that will be 240 hours, or about 24 hours a week over a 10-week quarter. And again, the number of hours that you work in a typical week should equal the number of credit hours you are registering for. It's also important that you tell us where you will be doing this work on any given day. There are a couple of different options here. You may be doing it remotely from home. You may be doing it from an on-campus building like the library, or you may be doing it from the site of your host organization. If you're doing it from the site of your host organization, you should specify the street address. If you're doing it from an on-campus building, you don't need to include an address. And certainly you don't need to include your home address if you're doing it remotely from home. But under the proposed schedule, I want to know roughly the number of hours you're working on a particular day and where you will be working from. Now, obviously, this is sort of an idealized schedule in a typical week, and we understand that your week-to-week schedule may vary. But we want to get a sense for how you plan on dividing up your hours in any particular week. This information will be useful to you in thinking about time management, and it'll be really informative for your site supervisor as they seek to understand how and where you will be completing your hours. Section 3 specifies when and where you will be meeting your site supervisor. We have a requirement that you meet with your site supervisor at least every other week, and we would prefer you to meet with them each week. And when I say we prefer for you to meet with them each week, what we really want is dedicated time in which you and your site supervisor will discuss the timeline for your project, the deliverables that you're producing, and any questions that you specifically have about your capstone. Other time that you spend with your site supervisor is great. In fact, I highly recommend that you network with your site supervisor, but we want to have at least some dedicated time each week for you to address specifics of your capstone and what you're trying to accomplish through your responsibilities. So this should specify a location, either a physical location with address, or if you're planning on doing the meeting remotely, you should specify the platform. You should also specify the day of the week and the time of day that you're planning on doing these meetings. If you plan on doing them every other week, please specify. Section 4 of the learning contract lays out when and where you will meet with your faculty advisor. Recall that you need to meet with your faculty advisor at least once each quarter, once in 490, at least once in 491, and at least once in 492. This meeting is specific in your learning contract to your meeting during 491. This meeting's goal is to discuss the progress you've made towards your research objectives, any modifications you'd like to make to your research question, and also to receive guidance on the direction of your annotated bibliography and any additional sources that you may need. Obviously, meeting once each quarter is the bare minimum. And if you'd like to meet with your faculty advisor more frequently, I wholeheartedly agree that would be a good idea. So in this case, not only do we need to know the location of your meeting and the time of day, but we also need to know what date you will be meeting with your faculty advisor. Side note, some faculty members aren't really keen on making appointments months in advance, so it may be necessary to specify a date in your learning contract by which time you will actually define a specific date. This might look like by the meeting will take place in the 5th week of the quarter, date and time to be determined by a particular date. It's not ideal, but in some cases, it's the best we can do for faculty members that have busy schedules. Section 5 of the learning contract specifies your deliverables. You will note that of this bulleted list of deliverables, most of these items are standard across all students within the capstone. Every student will produce a capstone journal. Every student will do their weekly check-ins, their highs and lows assignment. Every student will complete a reflective memorandum by the end of their capstone internship. Every student will do a blog post and respond to the blog posts of other students within the course. Every student is expected to do the weekly Twitter assignment, of course, of their capstone internship. And every student is expected to complete an annotated bibliography of at least 10 sources. We'll go into more of the details around these deliverables in a later lecture. The last deliverables on the list are the specific deliverables that you and your site supervisor have agreed on. Every student will be completing their own set of final deliverables specifically to their site supervisor. It's very important that you and your site supervisor meet to discuss what your deliverables will look like. It's fundamentally important that you agree on the shape, the direction of these deliverables, and what they will look like. And what I mean by that is that you and your site supervisor need to be on the same page about the content of the deliverables and the overall expectation for the material included. As an example, if a site supervisor says to you, I would like you to complete a report as part of your final deliverable, that's great. We've all done reports before. But if you and your site supervisor have very different ideas about the length of that report and about the specific content of that report, and that's not something that you work out in detail, then you may submit something that does not meet your site supervisor's expectations. And we don't want that to happen. Obviously, it could impact the outcome of any evaluation that you receive. So as part of the learning contract, we want you to think critically about the content of the final deliverable and get feedback from your site supervisor about the description that you include within your learning contract. It should indicate a lot of the very specific details, or at least specifications for the content of that deliverable product or multiple products in some cases. Please note that in the case of an honors capstone, there is a general expectation that the student produces more than one final deliverable for their supervisor. Section 6 of the learning contract lays out the timeline for the internship on a week-by-week basis. This should include any significant milestones or meetings, and this should be used during your one-on-one meetings with your site supervisor to gauge your progress in your capstone. Note that we typically include a 0 week within the timeline if you'd like to start a little bit before the start of your 491 quarter, and the timeline can extend beyond the end of the quarter. In this case, we have a 0 week and a 10 week and a 9 week summer quarter. Just highlighting a couple of the key points within this timeline. Notice that there is a milestone for completing 50% of the bibliography here in the 5th week. There are also indications of when drafts are going to be submitted for the report deliverable and the presentation deliverable. I also want to point out that the submission date for the deliverables should line up within the timeline. For instance, in this case, the student is submitting their memo, Twitter assignment, and bibliography during week 9, but they're submitting their final deliverables in week 10. And this aligns with the dates specified in the previous section. The last section, section 7, is really a placeholder. There was a time when we actually submitted learning contracts as printed paper documents, and signatures had to be obtained in person. That was a fairly cumbersome process and prevented students from modifying their learning contracts very easily. Moreover, many students will now do remote internships, and forcing folks to get physical signatures is really a lot of trouble. So instead, we go for a completely electronic format in this case. Once your learning contract and proposal are complete and are done to my satisfaction as the capstone instructor, then I will take those materials and transmit them to your faculty advisor and site supervisor for final approval. I'll do this by email, and I'll CC you on those materials. All your faculty advisor and site supervisor have to do is review the materials and then reply to my message to accept them or indicate any areas that require revision. Thus, we don't need physical signatures on the learning contract. Also, although you should be sharing the learning contract with your site supervisor and faculty advisor to ensure they agree with the content, I will be the one to ask for and receive final acceptance of the documents. Please make a note of that. All right, so that is the learning contract. I hope that this was clear to you. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to ask. This is a process that will occur iteratively over the quarter. Once you have secured your internship and you and your site supervisor have been matched, you should begin the process of completing the learning contract. And then once you secure a faculty advisor, you should get their input as well. The final learning contract that you will submit during the last week of the quarter is the one that we will have reviewed by, the one that will need to be approved. So you have some time to complete these documents. Thank you very much.